Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's just be totally honest for a second here. If you're the kind of person who feels this wave of genuine, completely unfiltered relief when your Friday night plans suddenly get canceled, you probably know exactly what society calls you, right? You've heard all the labels. You're a hermit, you're antisocial. Maybe they even call you boring. You're the person who would literally rather spend the evening alone in your apartment than shouting over the music at some crowded party. But here's the thing, those societal labels completely miss the mark. Psychology actually tells a fascinating and very different story about people who prefer their own living rooms. What the outside world views as this weird withdrawal is not avoidance at all. It's actually a vital and honestly a deeply misunderstood form of restoration.
Okay, let's dive into this. For decades, the mainstream narrative has been that staying home means you're hiding from the world. People just assume that if you aren't out there constantly socializing, well, you must be struggling. But modern psychology completely flips this assumption on its head. Being at home for a really significant portion of the population is not a symptom of social anxiety or depression. It's a fundamental biological mechanism for nervous system recovery. So the question we really should be asking isn't whether someone is antisocial, but whether their environment is simply exhausting them.
We need to draw a very sharp, very distinct line right now between two concepts that get thrown together way too often: loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is an unwanted absence of connection. It's that painful gap between the social contact you actually crave and what you currently have. But solitude? Solitude is a chosen state. It's a deliberate act of restoration. And the data completely backs this up. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Personality found something incredible. They found that people who score high in what researchers call solitude skills, which basically means the ability to be comfortable and self-sufficient when you're alone, well, they actually report higher overall life satisfaction. They thrive precisely because they know how to be by themselves.
Part 1. The physiological toll. The true cost of socializing. To really understand why this chosen solitude is so absolutely necessary, we have to look at the physical reality of socializing. Because for home-preferring people, this exhaustion isn't just in their heads, it's literally in their bodies. Think about what your brain does at a party. The social environment requires constant, chaotic, real-time processing. You're reading micro-expressions, you're managing your tone, monitoring social rules, tracking multiple conversations all at once. And for highly sensitive people, this triggers actual cortisol spikes, real stress hormone releases, even if you're having a blast. But then, you come home. The door closes, the lighting is controlled, the sound is exactly what you want it to be. And physically, your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, that physiological stress response simply powers down. It is a profound biological reset. And this brilliantly illustrates a core concept in psychology known as differential sensitivity to stimulation. Staying home isn't about disliking people, not at all. It's about having a nervous system with a lower threshold for stimulation. Social interaction naturally requires a massive amount of cognitive load. So for someone with intense differential sensitivity, that prolonged social exposure comes with a pretty steep cost. They don't need downtime because they're flawed or antisocial. They need dedicated downtime to metabolize all that intense sensory input.
Part 2. The architecture of solitude. Environmental control. Which brings us to how these individuals actually interact with their physical spaces. Environmental psychology shows us that the home offers something the outside world never, ever can: total environmental control. Think about it: lighting, sound, temperature, social demands, your own schedule. For someone whose nervous system processes external stimuli intensely, having this level of control is not boring, it's an absolute lifeline. Studies show that when a person has predictable, complete control over their sensory input, the brain's baseline stress response drops significantly. The home basically acts as a nervous system anchor, stripping away all that constant, exhausting background processing. Part 3. The journey of the mind, exploring the inner world.
Because of this amazing reset, what looks like an empty, totally uneventful night in from the outside is actually incredibly vibrant on the inside. To understand this, we need to introduce a heavy but incredibly validating neurological term: the default mode network. This is the brain system responsible for self-reflection, for imagination, and for making meaning of the world. And here's the fascinating part. This network thrives. It completely lights up, specifically during unstructured, solitary time. When you remove those external social demands, this internal engine just kicks into high gear. Now, what's really interesting here is seeing exactly what happens when that default mode network is given some uninterrupted space. This is where we see the unlocking of the inner world. People who choose solitude aren't just, staring blankly at walls. They're engaging in reflective reading, deep thinking, hobbies that require sustained focus, and complex creative projects. They cultivate these rich, deeply developed inner lives precisely because they give their brain the quiet runway it needs to really take off.
Part 4. Untangling introversion. Distinct traits. But this brings us to a major point of confusion. We need to do a little untangling, specifically regarding introversion, because society loves to lump everyone who stays home into one giant bucket. The common trap is assuming that, like staying home, automatically equals introvert. Actually, scratch that. They are overlapping, but they are absolutely distinct traits. Introversion in personality psychology is all about where you draw your energy from, internal reflection rather than external stimulation. But a home preference? That's driven by sensory regulation and the need for environmental control. You can actually be an incredibly extroverted person by temperament, but still fiercely prefer staying home because of a high sensory sensitivity or your specific attachment style. So the label doesn't always explain the whole person.
Part 5. A modern resilience skill, coping with chaos. Understanding that distinction is absolutely vital because preferring your home isn't some personality flaw from the past. It is rapidly becoming an essential advantage for the present. For decades, people who loved being home were treated as social outliers, like they needed to come out of their shell. But just look at the reality of modern life today. The toll of hyperconnectivity is staggering. We are facing constant notifications, packed social calendars, chronic stress, and elevated anxiety across the entire general population. Excessive external stimulation is literally causing mass burnout. Modern life is finally catching up to the home-preferring person, proving that our brains were never meant to be always on. So the crucial point is this: comfort with stillness is a protective factor. What was once pathologized as being a recluse or a hermit is actually a highly adaptive, resilient skill. The ability to self-regulate, to tolerate low stimulation, and to find genuine peace without requiring constant external input, that is exactly what society desperately needs right now to survive the modern era.
Part 6. Recognizing the warning signs. Maintaining healthy boundaries.
However, to have a truly responsible, nuanced discussion about this, we do have to look at the boundaries. Because while solitude is definitely a superpower, isolation is not. This is the stark, punchy question you really have to ask yourself or your loved ones. Is staying home a choice, or is it a compulsion? Healthy solitude preference is chosen. It feels restorative. Avoidant withdrawal, on the other hand, feels like a trap. It's the difference between closing your door to recharge your batteries and locking your door because you're genuinely afraid of the world outside. Solitude crosses the line into avoidance when it's driven by fear, shame, or depression. If staying home is replacing your meaningful human connections entirely rather than just complementing them, and if your overall mood and well-being are declining rather than improving, well, that's not just a quirky personality trait anymore. That is a clear indicator that it might be time to seek out a professional. The healthiest pattern is always intentional, restoring yourself in solitude while still holding on to the connections that truly matter. But for those of you who are engaging in healthy solitude, I want to leave you with this absolute truth. A well-designed home isn't indulgence. It's functional self-regulation. Your preference for the quiet, controlled environment of your living space over some chaotic night out is completely valid. It is exactly where your nervous system resets. It's a vital psychological tool. Liking to stay home was never the character flaw society made it out to be. It's where your inner world gets the runway it needs to expand in ways the chaotic outside world simply cannot replicate. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on today. Where does your default mode network go to thrive? Think about your own restorative habits, protect your peace, and I really hope this deeper look into the mind empowers you to fully, unapologetically enjoy your next quiet night in.